Welcome everyone to this webinar. And the webinar is really in support of a regional campaign that we have out right now called Act on Facts. The Food in Our Schools Matters. Policy can make a difference. The webinar is jointly hosted by our partners, and you can see the logos across the bottom. They include the Pan American Health Organization, the OECS Commission, FAO, CARFA, Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, Giant, and UNICEF. I would like to start with a quick bit of housekeeping. The webinar runs from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. We really want this to be an interactive session. Please feel free to use the chat and the Q&A function to ask questions and to interact with those who are also joining us on this webinar. The speakers will respond in real time using the Q&A function. Importantly, a recording of the webinar will be shared on HCC's website and our roundup. And most of all, we really want you to enjoy this webinar. We have an amazing panel of speakers that we're going to share their expertise and their experiences today as we collectively think about how do we move our school environments towards healthy school environments where the healthy choice is indeed the easy choice. But before we get started with our introductory remarks, we want to bring you back to the reason why we're here, and we're going to play a short video.
So what I would say about the situation at my children's school is that it makes my job as a parent more difficult because the environment offers unhealthy options and they're very attractive to my kids and they're always there and I'm not there to supervise.
So at my child's school, the foods that are available are bakes, chicken,
chips,
rice and peas,
water, sodas.
How I feel about these things? I think that more vegetables should be included in the meals because most of the time the meals are served without vegetables.
They don't have a cafeteria on school campus. What they have are vendors that the kids can go to during lunch. So of course I like to send meals with my children, but they want to eat all the unhealthy foods that they see their friends buying and eating during the day. And so it's a constant struggle back and forth between me wanting to make sure they have healthy food, but also not wanting to make it a really big issue and a really big fight. And so I have to compromise, and 2 days a week they are sent in with money that they are allowed to buy candy with, and one day I let them buy whatever lunch they want from the vendors, even if it's something that I would not normally get them. So this is introducing, foods to my kids that I would not normally let them have. I wouldn't let them normally eat this much candy or chips. It becomes like a constant fight, and it's a battle that I have to decide how much of a stance I want to make so that it's not something that becomes a really big issue with my children at this age, which is 8 and 9.
All right, Sir Trevor. So Trevor is the president of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, and he is going to deliver introductory remarks for us. Over to you, Sir Trevor.
So thanks very much, Maisha. And let me begin by welcoming everyone to today's webinar, which, as you heard, is hosted by the HCC in collaboration with our regional partners. As you heard, today's webinar aims to promote the recently launched HCC-led Healthy Food in Schools campaign, and also officially launch our Healthy Schools Model legislation. These initiatives are in fact the latest in a more than decade-long effort by the HCC and partners to encourage public and policymaker support for policies regulating the sale and marketing of foods high in sugar, fats, and salt in and around schools, while increasing the availability of healthy foods and clean drinking water. In 2007, CARICOM leaders recognized the need for education sectors in the region to promote programs aimed at providing healthy school meals and promoting healthy eating. In the following year, with the formation of the HCC, the seminal Bridgetown Civil Society NCD Declaration was publicized, the first of its kind, which advocated for promotion of healthier diets, establishing regional standards for food labeling and services, and protecting children and society's other vulnerable groups through legislative, educational, health promotional, and other measures. In 2015, greater focus was placed on healthier nutrition, especially of children in settings such as schools, with the CARICOM-led 6-point policy package, which recommends mandatory national nutrition standards for foods provided and sold in schools. 3 years later, CARICOM leaders endorsed a number of priorities for the third UN high-level meeting on NCDs, including implementing policies geared to preventing childhood obesity, including health-promoting school environments and front-of-package labeling. The HCC has continued to promote and advocate for evidence-based policies which lead to healthy food environments, with, for example, the publication of its 2017 to 2021 Civil Society Action Plan for Prevention of Childhood Obesity, and the launch in 2021 of a new transformative NCD agenda for building back better in the Caribbean, which calls for a comprehensive package of healthy food policies. I commend these two publications to your attention. These many initiatives have resulted in a greater awareness of the need for healthier Caribbean school environments, and there have been some positive developments, but many challenges remain, and so much more needs to be done. But that is the focus of today's webinar, and with those comments, I now hand back to you, Maisha.
Thank you, Sir Trevor, for those remarks. Hand over to our next speaker, who is Tamie Marie. Tamie Marie is HCC's communication consultant. She's going to share with you the actual campaign, Act on Facts. So Tamie, are you ready?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Tamie, and as Maisha mentioned, I'm the communications consultant for Act on Facts, a digital media campaign that is part of a wider regional and multi-stakeholder advocacy strategy that aims to promote healthy food environments in the Caribbean. Over the last year and a half, the HCC has spearheaded a number of campaigns to promote the overall well-being of children and young people, encourage adoption of evidence-based prevention policies like mandatory front-of-package warning labels, and more recently, to highlight philanthropic and cause marketing activities of unhealthy food brands as a conflict of interest for health. Act on Facts builds on those efforts, calling for school food environment regulations by drawing attention to two simple facts. 1, the food in our schools matters. And 2, policy can make a difference. Hopefully everyone can see my screen now. The campaign primarily targets policymakers and parents of school-age children, but civil society organizations and young people are the secondary targets. The graphics, as you see on screen, allude to the problem while emphasizing the positive potential of policies that regulate the marketing and sale of unhealthy foods and increase access to nutritious foods and drinking water. The video, which I will now share, relays the campaign's key takeaway. Thanks again to all the regional partners and local partners, actually, and to all of you for attending. Hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Tamie. That was great. So now we're going to start our very first panel, and I'm going to invite Francine to turn on her video and her audio. I'm going to introduce the panelists here. So Francine, over to you to introduce the panelists. In your session is really about taking a closer look at school food policies, learning from experiences across the region.
Thank you so much, Maisha. Good morning, everyone. Really happy that we are here today. And of course, the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados is truly pleased to be a co-sponsor of the Act on Facts campaign. I think this particular campaign has elevated our focus on the importance of school nutrition policies as a critical component of creating healthier school environments, because we know there's a lot of discussion around the importance of the policies, but I think this campaign has nailed it. Of course, we have an awesome panel this morning of persons like ourselves at the Heart and Stroke Foundation who have been working on policy over the years and working on advocacy for the school nutrition policy. And so I'd like to introduce firstly Ms. Michelle Ash, the Chief Nutritionist and Head of Nutrition and Metabolism Division at the Ministry of Health in Trinidad and Tobago, where I hear it is raining cats and dogs this morning. Ms. Dion Keynes, the Technical Officer for the National Food Industry Task Force, Ministry of Jamaica, Ministry of Health and Wellness in Jamaica. Welcome, Dion. And Dr. Ramona Archer-Bradshaw, the Chief Education Officer, Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training in Barbados, whom civil society is cheering on today as she has worked quite hard in ensuring that we did get a school nutrition policy approved by Cabinet. And of course, my colleagues, Barbara McGaw, Project Manager, Global Health Advocacy Project, Heart Foundation of Jamaica, and Shanique Bowden, the Executive Director of Jamaica Youth Action Network. Welcome, everyone. This morning, I'm going to be asking our panelists one specific question, and then, of course, opening for discussion. Before I start, I would just like to share very quickly that the work that the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, in collaboration with our Barbados Childhood Obesity Prevention Coalition, has been advocating, like so many of us, since 2019 for a school nutrition policy with particular focus on the restriction of the sale and marketing of unhealthy foods and drinks. And we've initiated projects like the Model School Program in 2019 that saw 6 schools agreeing without policy, without national policy, to restrict the sale of unhealthy foods and drinks in schools. We were able to take those lessons learned in helping with the stakeholder consultation that was led by the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Ministry of Education, supported by PAHO here in Barbados in 2020. So for us, and I imagine there are a number of us here on the chat this morning, for us it's a major milestone to hear that the policy has been approved by Cabinet and there is work towards an implementation. But I think one of the first experiences that I would like to share is that even when the policies have passed, and as you know, we had the SSB tax moved to 20% earlier this year as well, a major lesson that we have learned is that the advocacy does not end there. Civil society has to continue. And for us, we see ongoing support on 2 levels. One is that we have to continue working with our partners in the ministries to ensure that the work is progressed, because it cannot be done alone. And on our end, I was sharing with Maisha that we've recently produced an alternative snacks and beverages list, which we have shared with our partner ministries and will soon be sharing publicly. We're also working on a school monitoring app to help with the monitoring and evaluation process in the schools. But on the other level, civil society will continue its watchdog role in an effort to ensure that there's continued implementation of strong policy action. I think we have to do that because our journey shows that there are many challenges of conflict of interest and other hurdles that can stop the work and delay the process. But I think this process has shown the importance of multi-stakeholder involvement for the greater good. So today's session, I think, is really significant in moving our local process to a much broader and interdependent space. We have found along the journey that sharing of best practices and challenges faced at the global and regional levels have made us more equipped to ensure effective advocacy around the school nutrition policy. So today's webinar will allow us to strengthen this work across the region. We are stronger together. That's our mantra. And so today I'm going to ask our panelists to please share as much as they can within the time constraints, as much of the work and experiences that they have come across. And I will start with Ms. Michelle Ash. So Michelle, Trinidad and Tobago was among the first, I believe, to have the school ban on the sale of sugar sweetened beverages, I think in 2017. It's 5 years later, how you feel?
Yes.
Can you share successes and lessons learned on the implementation and your future plans?
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction. I am Michelle Ash, the Chief Nutritionist at Ministry of Health Trinidad and Tobago. We do feel that we've gotten a lot of headway compared to the beginning of the process when we were now launching the policy. So we had a soft launch of the policy in April 2017, and then we that gave some time for stakeholders to adopt and adapt. And then we had we required mandatory compliance by that new school term in September 2017. So definitely we would have had some time where we would have had a lot more discussions with various stakeholders, etc. Right? So we're talking about teachers, PTAs, etc. We would have had rolled out education as well before letting persons know about the alternatives, etc. So in terms of what the policy is, it is actually a national cabinet approved policy done in conjunction with the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education. And the name of it is actually the Prohibition on the Sale or Serving of Sugar Sweetened Beverages, or SSBs, as we like to nickname it now, in schools in Trinidad and Tobago. So the policy states that any beverage with added sugar in it, we did not allow that to be sold whatsoever. So once it had added sugar, we said no, as well as drinks with artificial sweeteners were not allowed to be sold. And we're talking about, so what that left really was things like water, 100% fruit juices, blended fruit juices, blended vegetable juices, or a mix of the two, low-fat milk beverages with 0 added sugars. So any beverage basically with 0 added sugars once it doesn't contain artificial sweeteners. And we found a good bit of success. We found that by 2019, we were reporting about 99% compliance for primary schools and about 97% compliance for secondary schools. Of course, we have limitations with some of the monitoring capacity that we have, because those are actually self-reports of principals from those school districts. So we still have some things that we need to tighten up in terms of that particular like monitoring and so on. And we had a lot of push factors. We had a lot of barriers before the implementation of the policy. But we had a lot of great push factors. So for example, HTC was one of our extensive supporters. We had UNICEF on our side, PAHO, we had our TTNC, the Alliance Diabetes Association of Trinidad and Tobago. They all supported us in our campaign, and they helped with the education as well. So we had a lot of support. So that was really great. As I mentioned before, we had a lot of education sessions before as well. And then we felt confident in rolling out a policy like this because we had success with prohibiting tobacco advertising, right? And it was shown to reduce its consumption. And then some of the barriers, unfortunately, would have been, we had some initial pushback, which was expected. However, now that has died down. It's now 2022. We've had an established healthy beverage alliance now in Trinidad and Tobago. We're pretty proud of that. We've had a little bit of resistance from independent and private cafeteria operators as well, you know, because they were concerned about loss of sales, etc. So we still have some, we still have to keep in touch with our internal stakeholders to assure them of the options that they have available. Right, and then we had a few technical loopholes in our policy. We did realize this. So we know that natural zero-calorie sweeteners weren't exactly technically addressed.
Yeah.
And also we didn't technically address things that teachers or students will bring from home in their lunch kits or their book bag or whatever. So we know we have some things to address, but we have a few things in the works right now. We are doing national school guidelines for food served in schools. So we are working on that, and we have an ambitious deadline to complete that updated and revised draft by December, this December, and we're trying to work with, come up with an implementation plan while we are doing the guidelines, because we realized that we didn't exactly think of it at the same time last time. We thought about it, okay, we did the policy and then we work on the implementation plan. So this time we're trying to think about both of them in one respect.
Michelle, thank you so much.
Yes.
In those 4 or 5 minutes, you've shared so many important learnings with us, and I imagine that there are going to be quite a few questions to you.
Of course.
But let us move to Dion
Thank you so
now.
much.
No problem. Thank you very much. You moved to Dion in Jamaica. And I know in 2019, you announced the restrictions on the sale of your SSBs in schools. I know we've faced COVID. And so I know that there were some issues, but could you share with us a little about the extent to which the guidelines have been implemented and any lessons learned as well?
Okay, sure. So what we have in Jamaica is interim guidelines for beverages in schools. And it includes all schools under the remit of the Ministry of Education and Youth up to the secondary level. So our guidelines actually limit the amount of sugar that's allowed in sweetened beverages, whether they're sweetened with sugar or with artificial sweeteners. And the limit is reduced stepwise. So upon implementation in 2019, that was 6 grams per 100 ml total sugar in sweetened beverages, reduced to 5 in 2020, 4 in 2021, and then it will be 2.5 grams per 100 ml effective January 1st next year, 2023. So unsweetened beverages are allowed. As far as ownership is concerned, while Ministry of Health could be thought of as owning the legitimate objective, no policies can be implemented in schools if they're not approved by the Ministry of Education. So this policy was actually a joint submission and continues to be implemented on a collaborative basis, with the Ministry of Education actually taking the forefront of this guideline. So with our enforcement, we have self-monitoring as well by the schools, and we also have our parish nutrition and dietetics officers who assist with monitoring, and we also have health education officers. We don't have any punitive measures associated. That was after consideration of our situation, and so we do need to strengthen our monitoring and our advocacy and our education. So we've noticed some gaps and weaknesses. Where compliance is concerned, we have seen a disruption caused by COVID. The compliance was higher in 2019 than it is now. So schools would have been closed for a little time, and then they would have been focused on just meeting the requirements to resume face-to-face classes. There are also more compliant beverages in 2019 because the sugar threshold was higher then. Also, schools have noted the cost of alternatives for 100% juice. So our consumers are more focused on finding alternatives that are sweet. And so that is where the cost really comes in, because 100% juice could be up to 4 or 5 times the cost of a non-compliant beverage, depending on what you compare it to. So for monitoring, we've noted we have limited HR capacity in the system. There's no dedicated team for monitoring. And so regular monitoring has been a challenge for the staff that has been asked to do so. For implementation, we've noted several different cultures across Jamaica. So some areas have access to almost every product, and some have access to very few products. There was a school that completely banned soda even before we had implemented the guidelines. But a bold move like this probably would not have gone over so well in a different school that had a different culture. We've also noticed some weakness with substitution. So in our guidelines, we caution, but not ban, just caution the use of artificial sweeteners. And while we did discuss that our aim is behavior change, we've been met with many beverages that have no sugar, but are still exceptionally sweet from the use of artificial sweeteners. We even have beverages that have both sugar and artificial sweeteners, and that's not working very well for our behavior change goals. Some lessons that we've learned already is the importance of labeling. So nutrition facts panel is voluntary. So where it is present, there is also a low rate of comprehension. I've also seen in our monitoring beverages called juice. So the name of the beverage would be like orange juice or pineapple juice. And then in the fine print at the bottom, it says that it's a juice drink. But how many people are going to notice the fine print? So they see the name orange juice and assume it is 100% juice. Interpretation of the guidelines, we have had our different sensitizations. However, schools ask for a list, and it's important to make it easy for them. So we have embarked on a system of voluntary registration, and we're hoping this will increase compliance and spur the beverage industry to develop compliant beverages. And I must say, I received a call probably last month from a manufacturer who said she went to the school she normally goes to, and the school said, "You're not on my list." And so she contacted me to register her product. Yes.
Excellent. Dion, we want to be so much already. I'm just really excited about this conversation and wondering, we probably will not have enough time to do everything. But thank you so much for what you've shared so far. We want to move now to Barbados. We're really crossing the waters today. And to Dr. Ramona Archer-Bradshaw, who is the Chief Education Officer here at the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training. Dr. Archer-Bradshaw, after an extensive consultative process, the government of Barbados, we know this year in May, approved a strong national food nutrition policy. The document is strong. And I know you're now moving towards implementation. Could you share with us, as you're moving to that process, what are some of the challenges and possible solutions that you guys are looking at?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Francine. I can tell you that the planning, organizing, and implementation of the Barbados Food Nutrition Policy has been a long but rewarding journey, with many meetings being held between the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, and other partners in education. It was important for us to create a policy of this nature because of the changing foodscape and the reduced physical activity among the population in Barbados. Within the last 40 years, the dietary habits of Barbadians have changed from consuming whole foods and home cooking to indulging in ultra-processed foods, foods high in fat, sugar and salt, increased portion sizes, and the purchasing of fast foods. This change in dietary habits and the preference for a sedentary lifestyle have become a public health concern for us. As a result, the Ministry of Education worked along with the Ministry of Health and Wellness and other partners to create what we call this Barbados School Nutrition Policy. In terms of the process, PAHO was contracted and they led the creation of this policy along with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and virtual meetings were held with other members of civil society during the COVID-19 pandemic. This policy basically provides a whole school approach and it encourages wide stakeholder involvement. It applies to all public and private educational institutions from nursery to tertiary level. And the policy actions have been structured based on 6 interrelated policy themes established by the World Health Organization School Policy Framework. And these are food service environment, school curriculum, physical activity, environment, school health and nutrition services, health promotion for school community, and school recognition. To date, we have implemented a number of strategies to support the implementation of the policy. For example, at the Barbados Athletic Championships this year, Water was advertised by the main sponsors. Primary and secondary school students participated in an essay as well, essay and poster competition, focusing on how to adopt a healthy lifestyle and the benefits of making lifestyle changes. The National Nutrition Center has trained counselors to teach appropriate eating in the health and family life education syllabus. Primary and secondary school students were involved in an active kids competition. In our schools, we have Water Wednesdays, and schools are encouraged to select additional days for children to focus on drinking water. We have Fruit Fridays, so children are encouraged to consume fruits as well. We had training sessions for canteen concessionaires and vendors, and that was undertaken by the Heart and Stroke Foundation along with other partners. And we also work along with the National Nutrition Center in terms of modifying the menus for school meals so that children can have healthier alternatives. And these are just some of the things that we've started. Of course, we will continue these, and we have some more things to implement. One thing that I'm particularly excited about is the culinary competition that we are planning, where we're encouraging students to create a healthy snack or a healthy dish. And the winning snack will be produced by a manufacturer to be sold at retail stores. So I'm very excited about that. We're also focusing on the training of physical education teachers to engage them in how to better teach physical education as opposed to focusing so much on competitive sport. I mean, competitive sport is good, but all of our children are not going to be involved in competition. It is important for them to know about physical education. We are seeing a lot of benefits so far. I mean, the children, it is a case of getting the parents on board with us, because you know the Ministry of Education can't do it alone, but the children at school, they know about the Water Wednesdays, they know about the Fruit Fridays, and when the children don't have their fruits on Fridays, you know, some of the others would ask them, how come you don't have your fruit, you know? So at least we're making inroads in that way.
And Dr. Archer Bradshaw, it's really good to hear that the implementation process has started, but I know that there are going to be challenges, and we're going to come back to those and some of the things that you're expecting and some of the solutions, but we want to make sure that we get in all our panelists, and then we open up for further discourse. So thank you very much, as we call you, Chief. And so now I turn to my colleagues who have been working with us shoulder to shoulder in the trenches on this project. Firstly, Barbara McGaw, who is the project manager at the Global Health Advocacy Project at Heart Foundation of Jamaica. And then of Shanique Bowden, who is the executive director, Jamaica Youth Action Network. Barbara, first question to you. I know civil society has played an important role in advocating for school policies. This hasn't happened by chance. Could you just share a little bit of the experiences of HFJ in supporting the current school guidelines?
Okay, thank you so much, Francine. You made an important point. Civil society plays an important role in policy. And those civil society organizations involved in public health really do have a role and an important action to help. We are really grateful and thankful that over the years, the Heart Foundation has had an excellent working relationship with the Ministry of Health and Wellness on many levels. And more recently, the Ministry of Education. So Dion shared about the reduction in sugary drinks in schools. The Heart Foundation was actually a part of that, because at the time we were doing our sugary drink, sensitization. In terms of the school nutrition policy, again, since 2019, we were part of the review process, including our partners at the Global Health Advocacy Incubator and UNC, and also CARE, our research partners. So we actually work closely to do a complete review, and I would say about 95% of our recommendations were included. So this is historical. As you know, COVID would have slowed down everything. And in the last couple of months, we have been involved again with the submission of the policy comments, and the Education Ministry is seeing us as a resource, which is really exciting. In other words, they have asked us to put up displays at their consultations. We've had a consultation with parents coming up. We had a consultation with students, and we also had, they had one with the school principals, you know? So it's a hard road, as you know, Francine, but once you get that working relationship and they see you as a resource, so they can call on us, you know, in every way, not just only for school policy and sugary drinks, but even in other areas such as front of package labeling, you know, and others. So our experience has been pretty positive, and we are very excited to know that our policy hopefully will be submitted really soon. And as I said, between Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And Barbara mentioned the consultative process that's going on right now in Jamaica. Shanique, I know that Jayan has been very involved in that process, especially with the young people. Could you share a little bit, because I think the youth voice, we didn't mention it when I spoke earlier, but the youth voice has been critical in Barbados in pushing for policy and in getting the attention of the policymakers. What has been your experience, and how have you managed to engage young Jamaicans in your process?
Yes, thank you, Francine, and good morning, everyone. Definitely, Jayan's introduction into the GHAI project was largely to fill that gap where the young people were concerned, because it was a bit, I guess, advocating for a policy to be passed that affects young people directly without directly engaging young people themselves. So Jayan came about in the space around March of last year, and primarily our focus has been on youth engagement and on youth empowerment, so that we engage youth and empower them to be able to talk up about issues affecting their health and nutrition within their own spaces, primarily in the school. So for the last year, we have been focusing, as Barbara said, on the school nutrition policy. And like Barbara, we're very excited to see where the policy is going and the steps that have been taken. Since the last month and a half, 2 months, we have also made submissions on the draft policy. So the policy was approved as a green paper in May of this year. And we made submissions based on some of the observations that we had having read through the policy and some additional recommendations that we had. And we would have also participated just last week in the youth consultation that the Ministry of Education and Health had around the policy, and invited several student groups as well as young people to participate and give their recommendation. Currently, as it relates to our primary work though, we engage right now a little over 20 youth ambassadors. We've grown since the summer, where we are building their capacity to lead and use their voices around the discussions happening around the nutrition policy and general health and nutrition issues affecting young people. So many of them are between the ages of probably 17 to 23, 24, thereabout. Some are still in high school, some recently finished high school and are now going into university, and some are in university. And they essentially support the JN team in carrying out our mandate around the school nutrition policy and advocating for the different issues that we see happening within the space. So we primarily focus on youth engagement and youth empowerment, because ultimately we want it to be a case where the concerns that are being raised around the nutrition in schools are being raised directly by the persons who are being impacted. We also employ strategies around social media to tap into the young people who are online. We do sensitization sessions, which we call health chats, where we speak with persons directly about some of the issues. More recently, it's been around the policies because it's been getting so much traction, and we want them to be aware of what's happening, what the policy is saying. We even developed a little IEC the other day, which outlines in youth-friendly term what the policy is saying. The policy has 5 main focus areas. This is what it means, and this is what you're supposed to be getting from those policy areas. So those are one of 2 ways. And then lastly, before I wrap up, I also want to mention that we have also started a petition where we're rallying young people as well as parents and school administrators to show their support for the policy, and to essentially signal to the government that we see what is happening and we like what we're seeing, and we definitely want you to prioritize finalizing this as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Shanique. Great work going over on in Jamaica. At this point, we've heard from all of our panelists. Thank you very much for that rich sharing and some important lessons to be learned. We have a few questions that I'd like you all to take, as many of you who wish to field them. I would think that one of the biggest experiences, and maybe the elephant in the room, has to be the conflict of interest that we face when we talk about challenges. The marketing, strong marketing within the schools and around the schools, which obviously will sometimes counter the work that we are trying to do in promoting a healthier school environment. I would love to hear from our panel in terms of some of the experiences you've had with conflict of interest and some of the strategies that you've been able to put in place. Who wishes to go first? Michelle, Jamaica, Trinidad has had 5 years. Would you like to share a little bit?
Hi, yes, thanks for opening. So in terms of conflict of interest, we were recently having some discussions on implementation of the decision-making tool that CARICOM has with regards to conflict of interest and management of nutrition interventions and policies. So we have noticed that we've had a lot, at least in the beginning of our policy launch, we've had some pushback, and there has been this, I don't want to say infiltration, but there would be persons that actually get your phone number as workers at Ministry of Health, and they would call you to, have personal meetings and discussions with you. And we have discussed that, at our various ministerial committee meetings, and we said, we really need to establish a policy on how it is we interact with some of our players and at what levels and at what forums. So I don't say we have established policies as yet,
yes,
but informally we have discussed it. So we are trying to remain as transparent as possible with our staff in letting them know how to handle such situations when they arise, and it will also extend to marketing of breast milk substitutes, etc., because we have had that particular issue for quite some time in that particular area. So we would actually need to have something on a legislative level, I think, to really manage that issue.
Strong, very strong point, Michelle. Extremely strong. Beyond Jamaica, I know at one point, one of the most famous headlines came out of Jamaica in 2019 or 2020 by the private sector, not over our dead bodies. And it went, it ricocheted across like, what? In other words, it's a
fight to the death.
Serious matter. It's a serious matter.
Fight to the death.
Yeah, so Diana, I'd love to hear how within the ministry, I mean, you have a minister that has been a champion of the process. So I'd love to hear how you guys have been dealing with that.
Well, you've mentioned the minister, and that's one of the, I guess you could say, the benefits that we have, that he's very involved. And where it pertains to discussions with the manufacturing industry, he's very involved there as well. We did have, during our consultations on the interim guidelines, we did have manufacturers who showed up to the session with flyers giving information. And so for us, that was a major wake up in the way that we do things, because, we just looked at it as everybody knows their place and everybody knows what's appropriate. But we really had to take a step back and to say, we need to also protect the information that's going forward. And so, like the country before me, we have been looking at using that conflict of interest document. We also do have large food companies that are involved in feeding programs, but we don't have something established as to how to analyze the conflict of interest and what to do next. And so we really have to do that. That's one of the major things that we have to do. And then one of the things that has been pointed out to us is that unlike in a larger country where companies specialize in the type of products that we have distributors who have various things from hand sanitizers to unhealthy foods to some even healthy foods. And so when we spoke about, say, banning these companies from sponsorship, it then became, then who can sponsor? And so we have that larger discussion that needs to happen on how we can look at the funding that is necessary for the schools to continue their operations well.
Excellent, excellent point. Dr. Archer Bradshaw, I know Barbados is now kind of getting into that as you move towards implementation. So it would be nice to hear what's happening behind the scenes. But how have you been dealing with the conflict of interest and some of the plans to mitigate against it?
Yes, well, we know that generally children have a taste for foods that are high in salt and high in fat and high in sugar. And it is a case of trying to change the mindset of the children, more so the mindset of the parents. There are some parents who believe that eating healthily is an expensive undertaking. And as a result, you know, they would go on Friday evenings or on Saturdays and buy the snacks for the children to carry to school for the rest of the week. You know, the cornrows and the popcorns and the juices, the box juices that are high in sugar, you know, because they think that that is taking care of their children, making sure that children have something to eat. So the greatest challenge, of course, would be changing the mindset of the parents and the children, getting them to understand that eating healthy does not mean that the food tastes bad. It's about, making it exciting. So we plan to educate parents. We had some seminars with canteen concessionaires and vendors with the Heart and Stroke Foundation, but we plan to educate parents, show them how they can prepare healthy meals, use the fruits, give children more water, let them do that at home so that when they get to school, it isn't something so strange. So the greatest threat is the unhealthy foods getting into the schools. Yes, but we believe that with sensitization that we can begin to change that and turn that around.
That's a really important point, and I think it really speaks to the importance of your stakeholder management and the work that's being done all around. But I would think from our experience thus far, and also just doing, looking at the global stage, that the industry also plays a significant role in conflict of interest because, it could affect, or they sense it will affect their bottom dollar. Have you already kind of talked about how you will manage those processes?
Yes, we have an implementation team, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health and Wellness, and they are working very hard on developing strategies to help the canteen concessionaires and vendors understand how they're negatively impacting students' lives by selling these unhealthy products. To date, we had about 2 sessions, and we plan to have these sessions on a regular basis because it's about changing mindsets. We don't have a law to say that we can't have these kinds of drinks or these kinds of foods in the school. But what we can certainly do, and what we have been doing, is that we've been showing the canteen concessionaires and vendors how what they sell can negatively impact the health of children. And we didn't only do that, but we also showed them what they can prepare instead. So instead of frying normal potato to create potato chips, maybe you can bake sweet potato, so we're giving them alternatives. We'll be going in and monitoring and encouraging all the way. So monitoring and evaluation is also an extremely important part of this process. It's
going to be key. I want to hear from Barbara in particular, because I know HFJ, Shanique, in terms of at the youth level, maybe also, so you can jump in. But what has been your findings and observations concerning the significant challenge that conflict of interest could pose to our process?
Okay, well, COVID may have been a windfall for the industry because what happened is that the lines got blurred. Corporate social responsibility and industry interference were merged because the food industry was very, very instrumental in supporting the government on a number of measures, including PPE, helping with vaccines, and of course, giving out food, food packages to the doctors, to the firemen. I mean, even Carreras, our tobacco company, gave food baskets to people in the constituency where Carreras used to have their office. So the lines got blurred. I think what it is, you have to pick your battles, because there's not every single industry or every single food industry. And of course, as Dion mentioned, we have a lot of distributors that have everything from shrimp to batteries to healthy food. What we tried to do was stick to the facts, was just to share the importance, of healthy options and healthy alternatives. But you don't bite the hand that feeds you. If you are a doctor that's been working 48 hours, you get some KFC, you're very happy. I mean, let's be realistic. They actually filled a gap, And that's what what it was. So we have tried, you know, to streamline, but we have to be very cautious,
Yes.
you know, because the connections in the food industry is very heavy. As you know, for example, what happened with the front of package labeling overnight, you know, well, not overnight, in an actual meeting, the votes were changed right in front of us. And we understand that certain entities were given the instructions to change their vote for the FOPL. And we can only imagine or assume that it had something to do with the food industry or the, you know, the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, because they're it's very difficult, you know, Francine, they're balancing consumers, but they're also balancing the industry, you know, and they didn't want people to lose income or lose investment in terms of the industry. So we try to, you know, step between the raindrops. We try to, where possible, highlight the importance of healthy options and so on.
Yeah.
But it was challenging.
Yeah. I think
it was challenging.
I think it begs the question, how do we engage all the stakeholders in a way that will redound to what we want to achieve? I think that's important. We have one question, and then I have a little side question before we close. But I know that the panelists have been asked to look at the Q&A down below and respond to the questions. But I think there was one that we wanted to just touch on really quickly. Was it how have we included the vendors, the school vendors, people who are vending around the schools, sometimes on the school premises? If any of the countries have had that experience of how they, in collecting the findings for the policy, how were the vendors approached?
Okay, well, we can comment that we did, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, have several vendor sensitization meetings. Of course, COVID put a stop to that as well. But what was very heartening, Francine, is that many of the vendors agreed with us. They said, Miss, is right, too much sugar in the drinks.
Yeah.
I'm going to carry bag water and I'm going to carry the lower sugar. They were actually very supportive. And the ministry has invited us to several meetings where the vendors, you know, and school principals were in terms of the sugary drink reduction.
Yeah, yeah.
So to be fair, we are going to upgrade, you know, we'll sort of re-engage now. And we have started to work on that. In Jamaica Moves has, you know, been re-engaged in the community, and with support of Ministry of Health and Diane and her team, we will continue to work, you know, along those lines.
Yeah, I know here in Barbados as well, the stakeholders consultation did include vendors, Dr. Archer Bradshaw, and definitely we got the same thing. They were already thinking about ways that they could help the process. I think they just really needed alternatives, and I would say, but they were supportive of how could they make a difference. And some of them are like the mummies and daddies of those children and aunties and uncles of those kids. But they also, I felt, needed to be empowered with information as to what to buy and how to buy. Of course, Dion, sure.
Yes, just wanted to add, yes, the Ministry of Health is working, but the Ministry of Education here has been very instrumental. They mobilize the persons for the sessions that we have, and they reach out to the vendors in the community. So whenever vendors are present at those sessions, a lot of times it's the Ministry of Education that did the groundwork to get them out.
Sorry, my mistake.
Currently, they're actually trying to work through the schools. So we plan to basically give the schools that template and ask them to work with their vendors. So we'll have the templated information. And we just ask them to work with their vendors to help us to get that information out.
Wow. Well, panel, as we are about to close, we have about 5 minutes. And the next panel that we will have has a number of regional health experts and authorities working with agencies that can help with the fast tracking of our school policies. I would ask each of you to answer as quickly as you can. If you had one wish list, you know, one wish, what help do you need to say to them, look, we need this to make our policy become even more effective or to come into effect? What would it be? And Michelle, you started us off, and if you could start us off again on this question.
Okay, thank you for the call here. My wish list would be actually for monitoring and verification capacity for the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. We are currently very, very limited We have a lack of budget and investment to establish robust monitoring systems in schools. And we would really love to implement school-based dietitians and nutritionists in schools, actually have them dedicated to schools, because we have community nutritionists and dietitians. However, they are stretched so thin, it is almost impossible for them to visit school districts, far less they have other districts to visit in terms of health centers as well. So it can't be stretched any further. And we definitely, this is a time where we need to implement things like that right now, since we're having so much discussion.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Dion?
Yes, sorry, could you repeat? I was reading through the question.
No problem, just a quick one. If you had to say to the regional health authorities, one area that you would like some help with to be able to make the policy more effective within about
for me personally,
1 minute.
Oh yes, 1 minute. That stakeholder empowerment is critical. We've been delivering the information in a way that has not been moving the consumers to act. Our statistics are not working. We have to be able to spur them to act, and then for them to say, this is what I want. Because when they make demands of the schools, of the vendors, of the manufacturers, they will have to comply. So I think we really have to revolutionize how we do our public education to get people to act and then empower them to demand.
Excellent. Dr. Archer Bradshaw?
Francine, I have two things as number one. Is that allowed? Right,
Hello.
We need help with promotion. We need to sensitize the public, the parents, the teachers, the principals, the students about the importance of reading labels, the importance of understanding what they consume and how it can affect them. That needs to be hammered home. That's number one. And my next number one is monitoring and evaluation. Research is important. We can only bring about change if we make evidence-based decisions. So we need help in that particular area.
Excellent.
So those are my 2 number ones.
Excellent. And Barbara and Shanique?
Well, Barbara, well, you know, I'm agreeing with everything that was said prior. However, what I would love to see is an integrated public education program, because we have had other policies in the past that suffered. For example, the tobacco bill some years ago. Excellent, but there was no public education program. And guess what? The tobacco company started to give information to the public. They took over that role, which was just anathema to me.
Yes.
And integrated and progressive implementation plan. So yes, the policy gets passed, yes. And we at the Heart Foundation, at the Global Health Advocacy Project, are willing to work with both education and health in any sort of way that can help with the implementation, with sensitization meetings, with creating material and soft and hard copy, you know, social media, whatever we can do. So those are my two.
Beautiful.
Right?
Beautiful. And Shanique, we give the youth the last word.
Yes, and it's very timely that you did that, because I was just thinking about the question, and young people, especially our children, have the most to gain from the policy and the most to lose from the policy if it is not implemented properly. So that is why my two primary wants are a strong implementation plan, which contemplates everything that Barbara said, as well as a strong monitoring implementation plan, monitoring and evaluation plan, as Dr. Ramona said. But more importantly, young people, especially the students, need to be directly engaged in the monitoring and evaluation of the policy once it is finalized. They need to be included every step of the way from start to finish. Nothing should be changed or added or considered without young people's involvement and consideration as the paramount consideration.
Shanique, thank you so much for that. We echo that in Barbados. I know Heart and Stroke Foundation and the coalition, those are the very same request that we would have as well of the regional health authorities. So we have come to the end. I can't say ladies and gentlemen to the panel. I say ladies. We have come to the end. Thank you so much for your experiences and your sharing. And we hope that moving forward, I'm sure that there are a number of people in our audience today who would have gained as they try to bring into effect their policies. So thank you so much. Have a great day. Maisha?
Thank you, Francine, and thank you, panelists. That was a fantastic panel. Really exciting information coming out. We learned about the different approaches that were used in different countries. We heard about challenges, and we heard a wish list as we contemplate solutions. And in terms of solutions, one of the challenges that we've repeatedly heard is, legislative capacity. And so Healthy Caribbean Coalition a year ago, with the support of Kimberly Benjamin and Nicole Foster, endeavored to develop model legislation for regulating the availability and marketing of unhealthy products in schools. And we did this with consultation across the region, wide consultation, and the documents have been completed. And so now I'm going to invite Ms. Nicole Foster, who is a law lecturer and head of the Law and Health Research Unit at the University of the West Indies, Cape Hill campus. And she's also an HCC longtime policy advisor. Nicole, welcome.
Thank you, Maisha. Let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, for some reason, 1 second. Let me try that again. Okay, there it is. And I need to just make it, sorry.
That's okay, take your time. There.
I need to move it up a bit. I need to, no, sorry.
That's fine. Well,
What
Nicole,
did you see, Maisha, sorry?
no, I was thinking, while you get your slides sorted, I was just going to add some more of the background in terms of the consultation and development of the model legislation. We can't see your slide deck though, so the PowerPoint is gone now.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. I sent you all the PowerPoint. I don't know if in the interest of time you want to just,
let me see if I have it. Hang on a minute.
You want to just do that? Because I'm not sure what I did, but I don't want us to waste time while I try to figure out what happened there. And I equally am not seeing something happen.
Better unshare, Nicole.
Yeah, no, something happened on my desktop, and because I'm not seeing.
That's okay. I've got it up. Just give me 1 sec. So can you stop sharing on your end?
I'm trying to.
Yeah, I can stop.
No.
There we go. Great. So hang on a minute there. And, okay, you should be good to go. Let me know when to advance.
Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry about that, everyone. So thank you, Maisha. And let me start off by saying that this is very much Kimberly's baby. Kimberly is a former student of mine. I'm a proud lecturer, feel like a little mommy, like my daughter. But Kimberly Benjamin really did the day-to-day, the detailed work on this. Kimberly wasn't able to be with us today. And so I'm stepping into that void and sort of trying to channel my inner Kimberly. Go ahead, Maisha. So just quickly what we're going to cover today, we're going to look at a little bit of the background, some of the key findings coming out of these two very important documents, and then just mention very briefly our next steps. Next. Okay, so before we look at the actual document, I thought it was important to explain, as Maisha said, there were extensive consultations, etc., in the context of coming up with these two very important model documents. But what is also very important to bear in mind is the starting point for these discussions. And the starting point was that we were very clear that whatever policy, whatever document was created needed to be one that came out of a human rights-based approach to the regulation of the school food environment. And so at the heart of all what we have in these documents it's very much the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which Barbados is a signatory to, but all CARICOM members are a signatory, have ratified, and also then the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which Barbados is, has ratified, and several CARICOM countries have also ratified. Next slide. And so to just give you historically a little bit of the backdrop to it, besides that motivation of orienting ourselves from a human rights base to ensure transparency, equity, you know, emphasis on the vulnerable, inclusiveness, etc. We had a number of CARICOM member states who were on their own in a somewhat ad hoc basis, trying to address, as you would have heard from the panel just now, trying in their own way to address this problem, because childhood obesity is not a new problem. It is very much a problem that's been with us for a while. And so we would have started with Trinidad and Tobago, as you heard, but then also we had at the level, as Trevor mentioned, our CARICOM heads of state also engaged on these issues. And in 2018, we had coming out of their heads of government meeting a commitment in terms of tackling childhood obesity, health promoting schools, and front of package warning labels. And even prior to that, of course, as Maisha and Trevor mentioned, we would have had the 6-point policy package of CARFA, which was also endorsed by ministers within CARFA as sort of the blueprint for going forward in 2016. And then in 2019, we had, of course, Jamaica with their interim beverage guidelines, looking at gradual restrictions on SSBs, as you would have heard, but we also had a number of other CARICOM partner countries, Bahamas, Grenada, Guyana, and Belize, from one way or another, indicating their intention to try to really concretely address this problem of the school nutrition environment. So in Bahamas and Grenada, a ban on beverages in schools, high sugar beverages. In Guyana, intention to implement a ban on the sale and marketing of sugar sweetened beverages in school. And then Belize, a similar attempt. So what was clear to us is that our governments were very much understanding that this was a problem that needed to be addressed, but to our mind, to the HCC's, from an HCC perspective, it was kind of important, since we're all one space, so to speak, and our problems are pretty much identical, that we thought that there was real value in seeking to bring together these disparate, unconnected, ad hoc responses to what is a common problem, and try to come up with a common, harmonized policy and legislative guidance. And in particular, what would have been missing from many of these discussions, because they were just very much driven by the response at the domestic level, was not necessarily integrating that broader international perspective in terms of the requirements from international treaties like the Rights of the Child Convention, like the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, like the documents coming out of WHO and PAHO, speaking to what was necessary in this space. Next slide. And so after extensive consultations throughout the region, as I said, led by Kimberly Benjamin, we were able to come up with a model policy for regulating the availability of marketing of unhealthy beverages and food products. Next slide. And so in terms of the goal of the policy, this model policy, the policy is aimed at contributing to the attainment of children's right to health and to adequate nutritious foods by creating healthy school environments that enable children to make informed, healthier choices. And I want you to pay particular attention to the specific objectives. Note that we're talking not, because remember we had these ad hoc disparate responses, some people doing, just SSB, some people banning maybe the sale, but not, the marketing, etc. And what you would see here in the objectives, that we have a complete comprehensive approach, which is really what is necessary if we're to have an effective response to this very challenging problem. So we're talking about banning exposure to and the power of marketing of. So we need to deal with both those dimensions, very much reflecting the conclusions of the Committee on Ending Childhood Obesity that Sir George Allen would have participated in so many years ago, recognizing that there are two dimensions, exposure to it, but also the power of the marketing. Ban the availability and consumption of unhealthy beverages and food products, because you know much of our regulations today have been just on beverages, and we understand that the problem is not limited to beverages, even though beverages are a big driver of our problem, and to promote and facilitate the availability and consumption of healthy beverages and healthy foods in and around schools. Note, we recognize that when we take away something, we're not leaving a vacuum, as the Trevor very, very eloquently put it. You know, we need to, on the one hand, regulate, but also then make the better choices available to our children. And note here as well that it's not just in the immediate school space, but in the environment, so in and around schools. Next. Okay, and just here, I won't go through the language, but just to point out, so these definitions that we find in the model policy are drawn from pre-existing agreed language in the context of documentation coming out of World Health Assemblies, so WHO documents as well as UNICEF documents. So we do have the set of recommendations on the marketing of foods and non-alcoholic beverages to children. That was since 2010. Our member states all participated in the WHO Assembly that endorsed these recommendations. We've had since then a number of reports and other bits of evidence coming out of our partner international organizations in the public health and child rights space, speaking to the need to look at marketing in a very broad terminology, capturing all aspects of marketing, including things like the low promotions and stuff like that, issues as to placement of goods, all of those things, that is part of marketing. And then, of course, we know we're very much in a digital space these days. So then we are also addressing digital marketing. Next slide. And who does the policy apply to? The policy, as a model policy, we are recommending that the policy should apply to all schools. So we have all nursery, pre-primary, primary, and secondary schools, whether they're public, government assisted, or private, right? Because we want to capture our children completely. It also applies, it gives a parameter, a suggested parameter to create a safe space, a buffer zone around the school. As I said, so its regulations are not just limited to the physical premises of the school. And in terms of its application, in terms of who it is addressed to, and you would recall that one of our panelists mentioned earlier that their policy didn't speak to, you know, what the teachers bring and what the kids bring in their lunch boxes, etc. And so you see here that the policy is addressed to individuals, companies, or groups who may make beverages and or foods available or cause such to be made available in and around schools, who may market them. It applies to principals, school administrators, school boards, teachers, teaching assistants, parents, guardians, etc. We need to have that broad capture if we are really to make a difference in the school space. Next. And then in terms of obviously in seeking to determine whether or not a product is high in sugar, salt, and fat, because as health advocates, as persons oriented in terms of human rights, we understand that whatever we do has to be based on evidence. The recommendation is to utilize that which already exists, so don't reinvent the wheel. So the PAHO nutrient profile model already establishes for us the thresholds for what would constitute products high in salt, sugar, and fat. And those are that is the model that we adopt in the model policy. Next slide. Now, in terms of, and this came up a lot in the wish list, right? We know in this region, we have an implementation challenge in many areas, not just in the area of school nutrition policies. And so certainly one of the key focuses in the policy is on the issue of implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. And so within the policy, the recommendation is that the Ministry of Education, because that is the ministry that has the primary responsibility for schools, for education, and this is the space in which we're working, would be the lead for implementing, monitoring, and evaluating this policy and collaborate them with other partners, which would of course include our ministries of health and wellness. And then, but note that the implementation and monitoring is not limited to the government level. Shanique very importantly mentioned that that implementation and monitoring has to involve all sectors of society. I think you flipped over a bit quickly. So in terms of monitoring, we're seeing in the policy inclusion of the school persons within the school space, like school boards, etc. We are asking for committees to be set up that would include student representatives, parent representatives, representatives from academia, such as the University of the West Indies, representatives from international organizations, such as a UNICEF, such as a PAHO, to ensure that we really get the benefit of those inputs and views in terms of monitoring and evaluation. And then equally important is, of course, enforcement. And while the policy speaks very powerfully in its language, obviously, you know that what really makes a difference in the scheme of things in terms of ensuring that we have the implementation is to make sure we have penalties, sanctions. And so there are a number of sanctions, penalties that are recommended, going from, you know, just a reprimand to canceling the license of a vendee, for example, in the context of being able to run the school canteen or whatever it may be. In terms of the staff of the school, obviously the school regulations, the Ministry of Education regulations would speak to that in terms of discipline. And then equally with parents and children, the school rules for the individual school would speak to that. But just to emphasize that really the policy to be meaningful must have meaningful enforcement and sanctions. Next slide. And so sort of linking in very much to, this is the last slide, linking in very much to the discussion that we just had, another element that we highlight throughout the model documents is the need to address conflict of interest. There is a clear, explicit recommendation that was endorsed by our member states to recognize that when they are working in this space, they have to take steps, concrete steps, to avoid conflict of interest. And as we said, that can be challenging in a Caribbean context. It is no excuse for not acting. And so the obligation remains there. And certainly, as HCC has already indicated, they have done quite a bit of work in this space, kind of helping flesh out a little bit ways in which conflict of interest can be managed in the unique space of small island developing states. Next slide. And so this is the very final slide. So in terms of next steps, clearly now the documents have been finalized. The idea is for us to disseminate. We hope that they will be very useful, even for those persons who have already had their policies in place, in terms of helping them understand maybe how they can do it better, how they can improve upon what they already have. And certainly that these documents, for those who don't have anything in place as yet, that they will utilize these documents as the basis for their discussions. And so following dissemination, hopefully we'll be able to have strategic meetings with key stakeholders to ensure that we continue this conversation and keep things moving and keep the momentum going in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, for an excellent comprehensive presentation as always. And so you see we have these tools, this very important tool to harmonize this legislation, these types of policies across the region. I've put in the chat just as a little note, from Jayan to support their petition in Jamaica. We've heard these fantastic panels. We've heard about the challenges that have been experienced, and we've talked about the kind of wish list. And now, as Francine said, we have a really exciting panel with institutions who can assist countries, provide that technical assistance to help them move forward and fast track these school environmental policies. So I would like to invite our next panelists to turn on their cameras. And we're going to open up this panel. So our first speaker is Mr. Peter Bolt. He is the new UNICEF representative for the Eastern Caribbean area. So Peter, welcome to the Caribbean, a warm Caribbean welcome to you.
Thanks.
Yes, so your question is really, I mean, you've heard everything the panelists have said. They've shared their wish list. Can you share what UNICEF Eastern Caribbean office is doing to make schools healthier for our children?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Maisha, and really happy to be here this morning. And let me first of all congratulate you and your colleagues at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition for this excellent webinar. And also thank all the speakers from the previous panel for their excellent contributions. And I'm really impressed from UNICEF's side to see so much work having already being done in the region with good success, although work to still be done, of course, and always need for, continuous monitoring and follow-up. Of course, UNICEF recognizes that good nutrition is a really critical building block for children to have the best start in life. If we don't get nutrition right from the beginning, from the earliest years, will we be building up problems that young people take into adulthood, leaving our societies poor economically, socially, and intellectually. 1/3 of the children in the region are overweight or obese, which means that we are, as a region, far away from achieving the SDG target that says to reduce overweight in children under 5 to below 3% by 2030. Unfortunately, the latest developments are not helping as the world faces a triple crisis of rising food prices, rising energy prices, and tightening financial conditions. And these already impact overall food security in the region, with now 57% of people in the Caribbean being food insecure, according to recent CARICOM and WFP data. The right to nutrition drives UNICEF's global nutrition strategy for 2030. And for the Eastern Caribbean region, the focus is mainly on obesity, with 3 clear goals: promoting healthy diets, regulating the food and beverage industry, and promoting physical activity. The food our children consume is often lacking in nutrients and too full of fat, sugar, and salt. And too often these foods are available at schools, where children actually spend most of their waking hours. As I said already, I was really impressed to hear about so much progress already being done across the region. When we saw the examples from Barbados, from Jamaica, St. Lucia, and from Trinidad and Tobago. And also for this particular initiative, the Acts on Foods campaign, UNICEF is extremely happy to be associated and promote food policies in schools and highlighting the dangers of fast food advertising in and around schools, and focus on the need to eat what we grow and to grow what we eat. This UNICEF support builds on our earlier cooperation with the Healthy Caribbean Coalition and a range of other partners in 2021, which focus on package warning labels and helping parents and adolescents to see what really goes into the products they are eating and drinking. Besides this, UNICEF supports several other related initiatives in the region. In Barbados, we're supporting information sessions for parents and adolescents, giving practical advice on healthy eating. In Grenada, we are supporting the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council to provide students courses in preparing nutritious meals and developing a positive attitude towards healthy eating and physical activity. And the graduates of these courses are also trainers themselves and ambassadors of healthy eating to then share their knowledge across the country. In Antigua and Barbuda, we're partnering with the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Environment with a variety of healthy eating interventions, including a DJ caravan, several PSAs, merchandising, and student health fairs. And lastly, in Anguilla, we support the Ministry of Education in implementing school-based campaign focusing on making healthy meals, targeting students and their parents. But these specific interventions cannot be seen separately from the other work UNICEF is doing across the region, such as in strengthening the quality and relevance of education, in building stronger social protection programs, in promoting integrated community-based services, child protection and well-being, and child and youth engagement and empowerment. And I also like to say something, I saw one comment in the Q&A earlier, that yes, a lot of this work and the discussion so far is focusing on a high level type of intervention at the policy level. And I think several speakers already spoke about the importance of also bringing the discussion down to the grassroots level and really engaging also with communities, with schools directly, with local professionals in the community, and with parents and students themselves. And I think here's some work to be done to kind of complement the work we are doing at the more policy level, to kind of work directly with these communities to get to really institute the change and to really make that change sustainable. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words. Fairly new to the Caribbean. I'm really happy to be here, and I look forward to engage with not only the coalition, with the governments around the room this morning in this particular important subject for us as UNICEF. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing the scope of work that UNICEF is doing, not only, as you've said, at the policy level, but at the grassroots level. And I think that links very nicely with one of the wish list asks we had from the prior panel, where they talked about how do we implement really strong public education programs so that the public is aware and they've become the demanders, and they demand these types of policies. We're going to switch now to regional frameworks. You know, how do we set kind of the tone regionally and provide the tools at the regional level? And I'm going to turn to Dr. Tamie Davidson. She is the Assistant Director of Surveillance and Disease Prevention and Control in the Division of, and the Head of Chronic Disease and Injury Department at CARPHA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency. And Tamie, so can you share a bit about the work that CARPHA is doing, particularly around your 6-point policy package?
Okay, thank you, Maisha. We're really delighted to be here and very excited to be part of this campaign and webinar. It's quite timely, I think, with us really trying to address some of the impacts of COVID, even on really trying to advance this public health agenda. So with respect to the situation in the region, as our previous speaker highlighted, the concern for CARPHA has been for the rise in childhood obesity, the impact on health, not only health, but the development of the Caribbean and NCDs. So in order to really address this major public health issue, CARPHA developed the 6-point policy package, which was focused on promoting healthier food environments and food security to address childhood obesity. And that is through joint action, policy action, as mentioned earlier on by many of our panelists. This is not something that we can do on our own, and it's going to require a whole of society approach or all hands on deck to get it done. So this package that was developed is a comprehensive set of what we call high priority evidence-based, feasible, cost-effective policy actions. And this was agreed to by the Council on Trade and Economic Development and the Council on Social Development, and endorsed this work and agreed to work collaboratively on these policy package to jointly address this problem. And the package includes 6 areas. One is addressing food labeling, nutrition. The second policy point is around nutrition standards and guidelines and standards for institution around nutrition. The third policy is around food marketing. And then the fourth policy looks at the nutritional quality of food, of the food trade supply, and fiscal policies around food. And then would be the 5th package that we look at. And then we have the food chain incentives. And these are led by different agencies within the region who work with us collaboratively to advance these policies. And so you would have heard many of the challenges are that you have to take a multi-pronged approach, a comprehensive approach on these different areas in order to really tackle this complex problem and advance this agenda. So we have been implementing this with the support of our regional partners. And in fact, today's policy is a key aspect of advancing our policy package. So one of the areas we have been working with our member states jointly and also in collaboration with PAHO was to develop technical recommendations for the development of nutrition standards for our Caribbean schools. That's an area that we've been working collaboratively on. We've also supported many of our member states developing their own nutrition school health policies and interventions really within schools, not only with ministries of health, but ministries of education and the wider school community. We also recently, last year, launched our Focal Points Network. And this was in response for the need to have more direct support, technical support, on the ground support to guide some of this process. We've also, as a part of our Caribbean Wellness Day initiative, which is commemorated each year, we have had a focus on healthy schools. And for this year was also a focus on healthy schools and promoting public education in collaboration with many of our partners that are on right now. So we continue to work closely with our member states, taking a joined up approach with our partners that are here on this call as we speak for this webinar, and also engaging our member states and at the community and grassroots level. We've also recently launched the Caribbean Moves initiative, and we're leading this on behalf of CARICOM and our CARICOM heads. And this again is another joined up approach based on Jamaica Moves, which looks at addressing NCDs and their risk factors, including promoting healthy nutrition, physical activity, and age-appropriate health checks within the different settings, including schools, and it takes a health promotion approach. And so this is a governance structure that we're working on and leading on with our partners to advance this agenda, and will be a major platform for accelerating some of the work we're doing. And then just to mention that really, as we've heard already, no one solution to address this problem. Really, it will require all of us taking this comprehensive, multi-pronged approach. And so this policy, as we support this model policy and sharing of this model policy, it will require all of these different areas which we have mentioned to be advanced. And that is also complemented by the public education and the grassroots education. So, you know, in keeping with our theme for this year for Caribbean Wellness Day, we want to highlight there's power from collective action. This is our neighborhood, our schools, our health. So it's going to be important for us to continue to reimagine a school environment that promotes health and well-being for all our children. And so would like to congratulate the Healthy Caribbean Coalition on this very, very important milestone that will advance this agenda. And we continue to pledge our support to this process. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamu, for sharing all of the work that you were doing across this area. And I think what, you know, the theme that you kept repeating was this joined up approach and multi-sectoral response. And we heard it from Francine as well, stronger together. So we recognize we're in small, you know, developed state settings. We need to really work together and leverage the expertise and comparative strengths of all of our respective partners and sectors of society. So switching now to the other regional health authority, PAHO, and we've done a lot of work with PAHO in this area. And so this is Mr. Dean Chambliss. He is a sub-regional program director in the Caribbean at PAHO WHO, and he's based here in Barbados. So Dean, you've heard, you know, as the other panelists have heard, all of the kind of issues that we're having in the region, some of successes, some challenges, and the respective wish lists. I'd like to hear from you now. You'd like to share what PAHO is doing to help member states move forward in this particular agenda.
Thank you so much, Maisha. Good morning, and good morning to fellow panelists, as well as all of those who are online. Thank you so much for this opportunity, you know, to be part of the Act on Facts campaign, as well as today's discussion. And I must second the congratulations of my colleague from UNICEF on the exciting new campaign. This, at least for me, this is the first event I have attended focused solely on the hugely important issue of good nutrition in our schools. And it has been both useful and educational to hear from all of the contributors about what's happening in this area across the Caribbean. The promotion and availability of unhealthy foods and beverages in schools, which are excessive in sugars, fats, and sodium, contribute to the onset of NCDs. It's well known that childhood obesity is a forerunner to adult obesity, and later, the onset of NCDs, the #1 cause of death and disability in the world. Even more worrying is the fact that the Caribbean still has the highest rate of NCD mortality in the Americas, including the highest premature mortality rates due to cardiovascular diseases. Today's event has given us insight into a variety of experiences in improving nutrition in schools, where the results have clearly been mixed thus far. In view of the need for urgent progress, PAHO is collaborating with our valued partners to support healthy food environments through a range of initiatives, and I'll mention only 2 of our most recent projects. First, PAHO collaborates with CARFA and the HCC to highlight our commitment to create active societies, a smoke-free Caribbean, and healthy schools in the lead up to and on Caribbean Wellness Day this past September 10th. Under the theme of Our Neighborhood, Our Health, and in line with the overall 5-year theme from 2020 to 2024 of Power Through Collective Action, we helped educate the public about the requirements of healthy environments and called on Caribbean people to reimagine healthy spaces. People were invited to submit their videos, photos, and comments with calls on policymakers to act through the implementation of healthful changes in schools, neighborhoods, and social environments. Secondly, we have engaged member states and partners through direct technical support and capacity building initiatives such as the Caribbean Public Health Law Forum. The effective use of laws, regulations, and policies, such as those geared toward ensuring healthy school nutrition, can help to reduce the supply of and demand for processed and ultra-processed food products. Strategies like front-of-package warning labels, the taxation of unhealthy products like sugar-sweetened beverages and tobacco products, and campaigns that emphasize the harmful use of alcohol can significantly reduce the effect of NCDs on the people of this region. However, like most entrenched social challenges, and as we've heard from other panelists, tackling NCDs calls for an all-of-society sustained approach. It requires support for initiatives and policy that can help control and prevent NCDs. This includes prioritization of the implementation of a regional nutritional standard, such as PAHO's nutrient profile model previously referred to facilitate the implementation of evidence-based nutrition policies at the national level. Another major priority is adoption of the revised CARICOM regional standard for labeling of foods, or CRS5. We are cognizant of the need to fast-track action through multi-sectoral and regional partnerships to address the resource constraints of member states and tackle industry interference. PAHO is therefore proud to be a partner in the Act on Facts campaign, a call to earnest action by stakeholders, particularly policymakers, to make decisive steps to address the scourge of NCDs in the Caribbean, starting with our children and the foods that they consume. Thank you very much again for this opportunity, and back to you, Maisha.
Thank you, Dean, for sharing the work that PAHO is doing. And I'm going to, in the interest of time, move very quickly on to Mr. Franson Jean. Franson is the Food Security Officer at the Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, here at the Sub-Regional Office in the Caribbean. And so, Franson, we're switching gears a little bit, moving into your backyard, and talking about food in schools and farming programs. So countries and international organizations are encouraging synergies between local farmers and school feeding programs. The uptake in the Caribbean has been relatively slow or negligible. What do we need to do to encourage governments to incorporate farm to school feeding programs and procurement type programs?
All right, thank you very much, Maisha. First of all, I would like to greet all the panelists, and I would like also to join them in congratulating in this very successful regional campaign. Thank you for the opportunity of being together in this very important event. We are very happy to be here. And also I bring greetings on behalf of Dr. Renata Clark, the FAO Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean. Let me start saying, in FAO, we recognize the amount of effort and resources it takes to run a national school feeding program successfully. Knowing that there has been and still is some national school feeding in all the Caribbean countries is really gratifying. And we want to congratulate and send greetings to all the Caribbean school feeding heroes. I'm referring to the teachers, principals, parents, students, nutritionists, cooks, national school feeding coordinators, legislators, farmers, etc. Talking about farmers, and to respond to your question, Maisha, we want to recognize and emphasize the importance of reimagining those existing national school feeding programs to incorporate more synergy with our local farmers. Some countries and institutions refer to that as farm to school programs or homegrown school feeding. Well, independently of what you call it, the idea here is that school feeding programs should be more than just about feeding the most vulnerable or just providing the amount of recommended daily energy intake required. In the FAO, we see them as an opportunity to, one, for children, independently of their economic status, to gain access to fresh, nutritious, and culturally accepted diets. And secondly, for nutrition education to influence consumption patterns and also encourage healthy eating habits. And thirdly, for smallholder farmers to have access to a secure market for their products. And finally, to encourage local production and consumption of specific value chains, including in the crops, livestock, and fisheries sectors. The understanding here, Maisha, is that greater inclusion of local products in the school feeding menus can, from one side, boost the consumption of more local products and also drive the interest of existing small farmers and potential ones, particularly the youth in the sector. For many countries in the region, the vision of school feeding remain unclear with no specific policy guidelines, already mentioned before. We believe it comes a time where such vision and policy guidelines need to be defined and with appropriate accountability performance measures in place. The example of countries like Brazil, Guatemala, and others in the region are vivid examples of how transformative such measures can be for national school feeding programs. Specifically, in the case of Brazil, the national school feeding policy mandates the program to be universal and distinctly of the socioeconomic status of students. And it stresses that 30% of products served in school meals are from local farmers. In the context of the Caribbean, it is essential to recognize, as mentioned earlier by Sir Trevor, the CARICOM's regional food and nutrition security policy emphasizes the importance of school to influence students to make nutritious food choices. And it makes specific recommendations for support to national school feeding programs to have at least 50% of food products coming from the CARICOM region. Embracing such bold recommendations requires governments and stakeholders in our region to take action on a number of issues, including: one, specific policy and legislative guidance where the intent and vision for school feeding programs are clearly defined, understood, and embraced by all. And importantly, appropriate budgets must be allocated. And secondly, more intersectorial and interinstitutional coordination and decision-making for national school feeding programs that should include at least the participation of health, education, and agriculture should be supported. And thirdly, school nutrition guidelines and standards, including menus and recipes, gastronomic practices, making sure that foods are attractive and tasty are very important. And thirdly, school feeding procurement systems that are more amenable and conducive for local and smallholder farmers are in place. And fifth, improvement of school feeding infrastructures, storage, and logistic capacities are very important. And lastly, but very important, the capacity of farmers, food processors, and distributors to supply adequate quantities of high quality food items should be addressed. This includes capacity for production, food safety, value addition, and ability to associate to be in group. Well, that's all I would say for now, Maisha, and thank you very much for the opportunity. We look forward to keep collaborating with you and all participating in this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francine. So we are moving quickly now at a rapid rate because I'm seeing that we're very close to noon. We do have a video recorded response to from Dr. Carleen Radix. We haven't had good luck with videos today, so we're going to try again. And this was really, her question was around how can the OECS Commission use the model legislation to fast track implementation of school policies across the OECS. So team, let's see if we can get Dr. Radix up on the screen.
Thank you so much for that question. First of all, let me just say how excited I am to be participating in this webinar and this panel on this very important topic of school policy and school nutrition. So model policies, the OECS, regional organizations like the OECS and CARICOM certainly have a role to play in model legislation and model policies around regional issues in which countries are deciding to move forward. And certainly this can be by bringing a new policy, but in the case here, like you said, it can also be by looking at policies that some of our successful member states have put in place and adapting that in a way that it can be shared and then adapted at the national level to be implemented. So this is certainly an important role. I wanted to also make the point that an additional role of organizations like the OECS, beyond the development of model policy and helping national policy be developed, is having that practical conversation about how to get that policy to practice. You know, member states that have taken the first steps, taken the lead, have done so and have had the challenges and the lessons learned. So they know what it takes to actually bring the policy to fruition. They understand how to engage the community, how to engage the schools, the children, the private sector, and all of those around this issue of school nutrition. This is something that obviously the agriculture sector, the education sector, and the health sector are all involved in. So, you know, as a regional entity and in keeping with regional integration, we definitely have a role to play in creating those fora in which real life situations can be shared between member states.
All of the panelists, please keep your cameras on, and I'll invite the panelists from the previous session to keep their panelists on. And recognizing Shanique's comment earlier, who has the most to gain and to lose from these policies? Young people. And with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Pierre Cooke Jr. He is our Youth Voices Technical Advisor at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, one of his many hats. And I know it's pouring cats and dogs in Trinidad where he's at law school. So we're lucky to have him on. Pierre, over to you to moderate the Q&A. We're going to help you in the chat background. There are some questions teed up there for you though. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy that we're having this session today. This is something that us at the HCC have been working on for a while, and it's really, really exciting to see us come this far. And I'm also happy to see that we have all our regional partners on board. So just getting on with the questions, the first question we have for Dr. Archer Bradshaw. I'm just going to invite the persons from the first panel again to turn your cameras on. I'm not sure if Dr. Archer Bradshaw is still with us.
She apologizes, she had to leave.
Okay, that's all right. So I think we'll continue to, we have another question about the education sector. Someone mentioning that, over the time they've been working in schools, they see more underweight children in the early sector and primary levels of schools, which affects their diet and their learning ability and their potential to afford healthy diets, not just healthy foods. And they're also making a connection between hunger and violence in Jamaica. So the question then is, who are addressing these most urgent problems? And I just want to reframe that in terms of looking at the social determinants of health. So what do you think needs to be done in terms of helping children outside of just the diets to ensure that they have, a healthier lifestyle? Since the question was posed in the Jamaica context, I'll ask Barbara to go first.
Repeat, sorry. Could you just repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah. So basically, in terms of social determinants of health, we're talking about diets, but there are other things that may contribute to the good or poor health of children. Are we determinants?
Okay, sorry, you broke up. So you're talking about the different areas in terms of undernutrition and overnutrition, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Well, there are some measures that are in place, but again, it's a human resource problem because the ideal would be have some sort of nutritional counseling support in all or most of the schools, but that would be really very difficult. However, I think when the school nutrition policy is implemented, the standards actually speak to some of the nutritional background that is needed. And hopefully, I think Dion did mention that we might be getting, more staff to sort of support that area. And of course, with training, say, of the vendors and training of this canteen staff in terms of what are the healthy options, But again, the challenge is that's only at school. What happens when, the children are at home? So I think there has to be a broader educational focus to include the parents, the grandparents and that sort of thing. So that's more on a national basis.
Okay, thank you. And Francine, just to go back to the point, and I know when we were working on the school nutrition policy in Barbados, one of the persons or the groups that we engaged were the vendors. So just a question in terms of how did the Heart and Stroke Foundation, particularly Childhood Obesity Prevention Coalition, engage these vendors in terms of the healthy food policy or the school nutrition policy?
Thanks, Pierre. Well, I think this was seen as a major stakeholder group from a number of vantage points. Yes, they provide the food and drink, for our student population, but also the importance of their own income and their own livelihood needed to be taken into consideration. What we did was we actually met with the association that was set up at the time. Well, they still set up Barven, and started the work from there. We met with them, presented to them, shared the vision, and you found that immediately you got that kind of response. And they helped then to facilitate the initial meetings with the vendors and began calling in. And I think that was very instructive to the whole process. And then basically we started to look at what were the needs of the vendors, because initially we would have thought that it was just sharing about the campaign and why the young people need help and what can they do. But we realized that the issue for the vendors was not revolt or having an issue with it. It was, how do we do this? They didn't know where to shop, how to buy things. They didn't understand the reading of the labels. And so our programs that we did with them so far have taken into consideration that training, how to read their labels. We did videos, have nutritionists. How do you make these drinks taste good? How do you take the things that children like and make them healthy? And so that's been the focus of the work.
Yeah, thank you. And just in terms of, for example, the experience in Jamaica, what has your experience been like in terms of engaging vendors and getting them to, buy into this whole healthy school policies? We know that oftentimes you may be able to get the policy enforced within the schools, but then just on the outskirts of the school environment, you have these vendors who may be selling things that are not necessarily healthy. So what has the experience been like in Jamaica in terms of engaging vendors to support the school nutrition policy?
Would you like me to take that one?
Sure.
Okay, so we've had diverse experiences. You will come across vendors who are very willing, the vendors who take it upon themselves to have fruit and vegetables, to make smoothies, to do those kinds of things. You have other vendors who say they sell what the students want. They sell what turns over quickly. So in the school, you would have had a really nice, fancy type of menu with variety and vegetables and whatever. And the students go to the fence and purchase like some fried chicken back with rice because that's what they like and that is affordable for them. You also have vendors who say, okay, we want to comply, but tell us what we must sell. So we have the issue of what is it they're supposed to sell? Can they sell it at a price that the students can afford? And do the students even want it? Which kind of takes me back to my little passion area of motivating people to want better for themselves. In fact, even recognizing that what you have now is not good for you. So Jamaica is small, but it's very big in terms of the various situations that exist across Jamaica. So we can't just say we have one issue. It's a very diverse issue. And speaking about what you're talking about before, it's a whole of government approach that has to be taken. There's so many determinants, and without knowing, I'm pretty sure we have policies in each ministry that address many of these things, but we also have an issue with enforcement and then our collaboration in ensuring that we work on these policies and implement them.
Yes, and that's a very, very important point in terms of a whole of government approach. Ms. Foster, just a quick question in terms of the legislation and policy. So we know the importance of having this formal structure, this legislative environment, which creates a protective space for children. How much then is it important or beneficial to have governments with the political will to implement these things? So what is the role of governments in terms of creating this healthy food space for children?
Oh, governments are critical. Governments are sine qua non. As I believe Dion said earlier, I mean, she spoke about the fact that because they have such a champion in Minister Hutton, that has given them some ammunition in terms of countering conflict of interest. So while whole of government, whole of society responses are critical, that's the only thing that's going to work in this space, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that there's some really, really key players in each of those spaces. And if we don't have the politicians on board and with the political will, so like, for example, with Barbados, we saw very strong leadership in the context of the front of pack warning labels. We saw our trade minister, our trade, which we wouldn't normally expect, our trade minister able to say, no, this is a health issue. We're going to be guided by health and take the decisions that work for public health. And, you know, we were like, bravo, but it's that kind of leadership that you need. And in fact, you know, it's not unique to this space. I mean, just to draw the correlation to like smoking, smoke-free environments, right? The tobacco space. We saw exactly that too. We recently did this case study with St. Lucia and et cetera. And you know, all the time it comes back to if we have a champion, a political champion, a minister who's willing to run with this, to fight for this, to make the arguments, to speak to their colleagues. So it really is the politicians, the government are critical parts of this. And as Dion was saying earlier, it's important that they speak to each other because a lot of times our ministries work in silos and then they undermine each other. So from both levels, both at the personal level of having champions, so having persons who are really able to fight for this and work with civil society and others is important. But then also more broadly in terms of recognizing as a government, you have a responsibility to talk with and collaborate with each other.
Thank you very much, Ms. Foster. And again, I just want to reiterate the importance of this whole of government, whole of society approach. We need government, we need civil society organizations, we need our regional partners, PAHO, CARFA, FAO, UNICEF. So as we continue to fight the fight in terms of school nutrition policies and protecting our children, we encourage you all to champion this movement. Maisha, I'm just going to hand over to you for our bit of closing remarks.
Thank you, Pierre, and thanks for closing on that note. I think go back to the recent campaign for Caribbean Wellness Day. This is our neighborhood, and we all need to work together to make a neighborhood that we want to live in, and in particular where children have access to nutritious foods in school environments. So bear with us. We're going to try our beloved video one more time. If it does not work, then we will wrap up. So I'm going to ask our team to see if we can get it going.
Maisha, there was a request to just let it play because persons were saying they can read the text. So even if the audio doesn't work, they would still love to see the video.
Okay, I'm not sure. Danielle, is there text all throughout? Is it?
Unfortunately not, just in certain sections of the video.
Okay.
So we're trying to see if we can get it up and going. While we do that, I just want to let you all know about very much related across the region right now, and you would have heard some of this in Mr. Chambliss's remarks. We are having, in essence, kind of a revote on front of package warning labeling. And front of package warning labeling is extremely important as an enabling or foundational policy. It really allows us to understand and identify the foods that need to be regulated in the broad spectrum of a comprehensive package of food policies, such as the 6-point policy package referred to by Dr. Davidson. So when we talk about the importance of front of package warning labeling, and I just wanted to share my screen, so those of you who may not be familiar, we're talking about these labels. And right now, these labels are what are recommended in the current final draft regional CARICOM standard for labeling of prepackaged foods. We had a vote last year where we had 6 countries in favor, 3 against, and 6 abstained. CrossQ, the regional organization, in partnership with the national bureaus and national merit committees, are currently reaching out to their countries and asking them to decide again on whether or not we want to continue with the current standard or modify it. This standard with the high and warning labels is based on the most rigorous scientific evidence, and evidence not only generated globally, but generated in our region by PAHO, the University of Technology in Jamaica, and the Jamaica Ministry of Health, which shows that the octagonal high and warning labels consistently outperform all other labels in empowering consumers to correctly, quickly, and easily identify foods which are unhealthy, foods which are high in these critical nutrients of public health concern, which we know lead to obesity and NCDs. So act on facts. The facts are when you generate science based on, which is generated in a conflict of interest-free environment, we find that these labels are the best. And right now, CARICOM has done its job, and it has presented a standard which is based on the best evidence and the best labels for Caribbean people. Policy can make a difference. Please reach out to your local bureau, or if you are an actor on the local merit committees, please try to influence committees to make sure the decision making is driven by evidence, and we move forward supporting this label again. So I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Thank you all for sticking with us. We are at 12:03, a bit over time. Thank you for participating. Thanks to all of our panelists and our partners. We are so proud to have been part of this regional campaign involving so many partners. Again, we keep doing this, and it's really something which has not happened before. A real testament to this idea that as a CARICOM community, we need to work together. So thank you all for joining.
Do you remember when a policy was implemented in your school to make it healthier?
I absolutely do. It was in the menus.
Okay, and what has changed in your school since then in terms of the menu?
Well, they replaced all the sodas with low sugar apple juice, and all the sugary snacks were replaced with fruit kebabs and homemade granola bars.
Okay.
Why do you think this school policy is important?
I think it's important to help kids own their health and for them to be aware of the difference between artificial sugars and natural sugars going into their body. And I think if you give them accountability from a young age, they will just go straight into it as an adult.
Do you think this school policy is enough to make school environments healthier?
Definitely. I think once kids do what they're told, and when you present it to them, it becomes part of their natural being to choose those things that they're being given to them. So if you give them the natural things up front, then it becomes a natural way of choosing it all the time. So don't you want to be your strongest, smartest, and happiest self?
I absolutely do.
Okay, lovely.